Philip Kramer, an illustrious American bass guitarist, graced the rock ensemble Iron Butterfly and its affiliated groups from 1974 to 1980. Following his musical tenure, he transitioned into a distinguished career as a computer engineering executive and inventor. Tragically, he vanished in February 1995, with his remains discovered in May 1999. Born in 1952 in Youngstown, Ohio, Kramer joined Iron Butterfly in 1865-1974, contributing his talents to two of the band's albums, Scorching Beauty and Sun and Steel, both released in 1975. After the band's dissolution, he collaborated with founding member Ron Bushy in the group's Magic and Gold from 1977 to 1980. Kramer later earned a degree in aerospace engineering, lending his expertise to the MX missile guidance system for a U.S. Department of Defense contractor, and subsequently making strides in the computer industry with innovations in fractal compression, facial recognition systems, and advanced communications. The son of an electrical engineering professor, Kramer nurtured a profound fascination with science and mathematical principles throughout his life. At the tender age of 12, he showcased his ingenuity by winning a science fair at Liberty School in Youngstown, Ohio, with a laser powerful enough to pop a balloon. In 1990, at 38, he co-founded Total Multimedia Inc., alongside Randy Jackson, brother of the legendary Michael Jackson, to pioneer data compression techniques for CD-ROMs. The company proudly asserts it achieved the first video compression capable of delivering full-motion video from a single-speed CD-ROM in 1992. However, in 1994, the firm faced reorganization under bankruptcy, leading to new leadership. Despite the turmoil, Kramer remained with the company until his mysterious disappearance, deeply impacted by the financial upheaval. He co-developed soft video utilizing fractal compression and claimed to be involved in a groundbreaking transmission project aimed at achieving faster-than-light communication, a pursuit linked to his father's long-standing efforts to challenge Albert Einstein's theories. On February 12, 1995, Kramer traveled to Los Angeles International Airport to collect a business associate and his spouse. The associate had played a significant role as a principal investor in Total Multimedia and was also a key figure in its bankruptcy reorganization. While en route to the airport, Kramer contacted his wife to inform her of a change in plans, indicating that the associate and his wife should head directly to a hotel, where they would later join them. However, Kramer seemingly spent an additional 45 minutes at the airport for reasons that remain unclear. During his journey to and from the airport, Kramer engaged in numerous cell phone conversations, including calls to his wife, Ron Bushy, and ultimately to the police. In this last call, he expressed distress, stating, "I'm going to kill myself, and I want everyone to know O.J. Simpson is innocent." They did it. Before his disappearance, Kramer had been contracted to assess the authenticity of a videotape related to the O.J. Simpson murder trial, which was in the possession of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Drug Enforcement Administration. The Office of James Trafficant took an interest in Kramer's case, reaching out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation on 2 occasions to request an investigation. However, the Federal Bureau of Investigation determined that there was insufficient cause to initiate a separate criminal inquiry, although they did assist the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. Kramer was never seen again, prompting a widespread search effort, extensive media coverage, and discussions on various talk shows, including segments on The Oprah Winfrey Show, America's Most Wanted, The Unexplained, Strange Disappearances, first aired June 7, 2000, and Unsolved Mysteries, Season 8, Episode 3. An article by Frederick L. Rice in Skeptic Volume 4, Number 2, 1996, detailed several conspiracy theories surrounding his disappearance. In the opening of the March 6, 1997, episode of Coast to Coast AM, remote viewer Ed Dames informed Kathy Kramer Peterson, Phil's sister, that his team's conclusions suggested Phil had been murdered, with the body buried but quickly decomposed due to water and subsequently transported to Montana from California. Recently, the enigmatic case of Kramer's disappearance was featured in an episode titled Conspiracy Philip Taylor Kramer on the audio podcast Supernatural with Ashley Flowers, which was released on August 24, 2021. On May 29, 1999, Kramer's Ford Aerostar minivan and skeletal remains were discovered by photographers searching for vintage car wrecks at the bottom of Decker Canyon, located near Malibu, California. Despite this finding, Kramer's father maintained that he did not take his own life, stating, "Taylor had informed me long before that individuals were harassing him. They were interested in what he was doing, and some even issued threats. He once told me that if I ever heard him say he was going to end his life, I should not believe it at all. He would need assistance." Rachel Cheesley, more commonly recognized as Lady Grange, was the spouse of Lord Grange, Scottish attorney with Jacobite leanings. After a tumultuous 25 years of matrimony and the upbringing of 9 children, the couple's relationship deteriorated into a bitter separation. In 1732, following Lady Grange's revelation of letters she asserted were proof of her husband's treasonous conspiracies against the Hanoverian regime in London, Lord Grange orchestrated her abduction. She was subsequently confined in a series of isolated locales along Scotland's western coast, including the Monarch Isles, Skye, and St Kilda. Born into a family of 10, Rachel Cheesley was the daughter of John Cheesley of Dalry and Margaret Nicholson. Her parents' union was fraught with discord, leading Margaret to seek legal recourse for financial support. She was awarded 1,700 marks by Sir George Lockhart of Carnwath, the esteemed Lord President of the Court of Session. Enraged by this outcome, John Cheesley infamously shot Lockhart dead on Edinburgh's High Street as he returned from church on Easter Sunday, 31st March, 1689. He did not attempt to flee and openly confessed during his trial, which took place the following day before the Lord Provost. Just 2 days later, he was taken from the toll booth to the Mercat Cross on the High Street, where his right hand was severed before his execution, with the pistol used in the murder hung around his neck. Rachel Cheesley was baptized on the 4th of February, 1679, suggesting she was born shortly before that date, making her approximately 10 years old at the time of her father's execution. The exact date of her marriage to James Erskine remains uncertain. However, based on a letter she penned later in life, it is believed to have occurred around 1707 when she was about 28. Erskine was the younger son of Charles Erskine, Earl of Mar, and following their father's death in 1689, his elder brother John ascended to the title of Earl of Mar. These were times of significant political unrest, with the Jacobite cause still resonating in many regions of Scotland, and the younger Earl was colloquially known as Bobbing John for his shifting allegiances. Following his significant involvement in the Jacobite uprising of 1715, he was stripped of his title, exiled, and never returned to Scotland. The young Lady Grange was often referred to as a wild beauty, and it is believed that their marriage was hastily arranged after she found herself with a child. Despite this uncertain beginning, Lord and Lady Grange maintained a facade of a tranquil domestic life. They split their time between a townhouse at the base of Nidri's Wynd, just off Edinburgh's High Street, and an estate in Preston, where Lady Grange took on the role of factor for a period. Her husband, a distinguished lawyer, ascended to the position of Lord Justice Clerk in 1710, and together they welcomed 9 children into the world. Tragically, Lady Grange suffered 2 miscarriages, and one of their children is recorded to have passed away in 1721. However, beneath the surface of their domesticity, lay a strain in their marriage that eventually became known. In late 1717 or early 1718, Erskine was alerted by a friend to the presence of adversaries within the government. Around the same time, a tutor of their children noted in his diary that Lady Grange exhibited an imperious nature coupled with an unreasonable temper. Her volatile outbursts reportedly instilled fear in her younger daughters, and following her abduction, none of her children took action on her behalf, despite the eldest being in their early 20s at the time. Macaulay observes that the family's calm acceptance of their mother's disappearance might lead many to believe it was not a matter of concern for them. This apparent indifference may have been shaped by the fact that their mother had previously disinherited them while the youngest were still mere infants, a decision deemed unnatural by the Sobieski Stuarts, two English brothers who claimed lineage from Prince Charles Edward Stuart. As the marital difficulties of the Erskines escalated, Lady Grange's behavior became increasingly erratic. In 1730, she was stripped of her role overseeing the Preston estate, which only heightened her distress. The revelation of her husband's affair with Fanny Lindsay, a coffeehouse proprietor, likely exacerbated her turmoil. In April of that year, she made alarming threats of suicide and expressed a desire to run through the streets of Edinburgh in the nude. It is suggested that she kept a razor beneath her pillow and sought to intimidate her husband by invoking her lineage. On July 27th, she formally signed a separation agreement from James Erskine, yet the situation did not improve. For instance, she publicly confronted her husband both in the streets and at church, leading him and one of their children to seek refuge in a tavern for over 2 hours on one occasion. She intercepted one of his letters and presented it to the authorities, claiming it contained treasonous content. Reports indicate that she stood outside their residence on Nidri's Wynd, brandishing the letter and shouting profanities on at least 2 occasions. In January 1732, she arranged for a stagecoach to London, prompting James Erskine and his associates to take urgent measures to address the situation. On the night of January 22nd, 1732, Lady Grange was forcibly taken from her lodgings on Nidri's Wynd by 2 Highland lairds, Roderick MacLeod of Berneray and MacDonald of Morar, along with several of their men. Following a violent struggle that resulted in several of her teeth being knocked out, she was blindfolded and transported out of the city in a sedan chair, accompanied by Alexander Foster of Carsebonny. They proceeded northward, transferring from the sedan chair near Moultris Hill, now St Andrew Square, and continuing on horseback to the residence of John MacLeod, an advocate at Muiravonside, where she spent the night. She was subsequently transported north to Westerpolmaze, located near Falkirk, where she remained until August 15th, confined on the ground floor of an unoccupied tower. At that time, she was over 50 years old. Following this, Peter Fraser, a page of Lord Lovat, and his men escorted her westward through Perthshire. In Balquhidder, as per MacGregor tradition, she was graciously received in the Great Hall, offered a meal of venison, and provided with a bed made of heather and covered with deerskins. The presence of St Fillan's Pool on the river Fillan, near Tindrum, would have served as a convenient cover for her captors, as it was commonly associated with cures for insanity, which could have explained her situation to onlookers. The specifics of her journey from that point remain unclear, but she was probably taken through Glencoe to Loch Ness, and then via Glengarry to Loch Howern on the west coast. After a brief pause, she was placed aboard a ship bound for Heisker, the principal island of the Monach Isles. The challenges of her predicament must have quickly become apparent. She found herself among men whose allegiance lay with clan leaders rather than the law, and very few of them spoke English. Their native Gaelic would have been largely unintelligible to her, although, over time, she gradually picked up some of the languages. She expressed her frustration that young members of the local nobility visited her while she waited by the shores of Loch Horn, noting that They came to see me, but not to assist me. The Monarch Isles, also referred to as Heisker, are situated 8 kilometers, 5 miles, west of North Uist, in the Outer Hebrides, an archipelago off the western coast of Scotland. The main islands, Sean Ear, and Shivinish, are interconnected at low tide and encompass a total area of 357 hectares, 880 acres. These islands are low-lying and fertile, with an estimated population of around 100 in the 18th century. During the ownership of Sir Alexander MacDonald of Sleat, Lady Grange resided with his tacksman, another Alexander MacDonald, and his spouse. When she expressed dissatisfaction with her living conditions, her host informed her that he had no instructions to provide her with clothing or food beyond what he and his wife typically consumed. For 2 years, she endured isolation, not even being informed of the name of the island where she was held, and it took her considerable time to ascertain the identity of her landlord. Her stay continued until June 1734, when John and Norman MacLeod from North Uist arrived to relocate her. They claimed they were taking her to Orkney, but instead they set sail for the remote Atlantic islands of St Kilda. One of the notable ruins on Hirta, part of the St Kilda archipelago, is the site known as Lady Grange's house. This house is a substantial cleat, or stone storage hut, located in the village meadows, often described as resembling a giant Christmas pudding. Some historians suggest it was constructed on the site of a larger black house, where she was confined, although in 1838, the grandson of a St Kildan who had aided her mentioned dimensions of 20 feet by 10 feet, 7 meters by 3 meters, which aligns closely with the size of the cleat. Hirta is more isolated than the Monarch Isles, situated 66 kilometers, 41 miles, west-northwest of Benbecula in the North Atlantic Ocean, where the overarching theme of life on St Kilda was one of seclusion. When Martin visited the islands in 1697, the only way to reach them was by open longboat, a journey that could take several days and nights of rowing and sailing across the open sea, particularly challenging during autumn and winter. Throughout the year, waves reaching heights of 12 meters, 40 feet, crash against the shores of Village Bay, and even on calmer days, landing on treacherous rocks can be perilous. Isolated by both distance and weather, the islanders had limited knowledge of the outside world. Lady Grange's situation was notably more distressing, compounded by the fact that no one on the island communicated in English. She characterized Hirta as a vile, nasty, stinking, poor isle, and lamented, "I was in great misery in the Husker, but I'm 10 times worse here." Her accommodations were exceedingly basic, featuring an earthen floor, walls that leaked during rain, and the necessity to remove snow by hand from behind her bed in winter. Her days were largely spent in slumber, consuming whatever whiskey was available, and she would stroll along the shore at night, lamenting her plight. During her time on Hirta, she managed to write 2 letters detailing her experiences, which eventually made their way to Edinburgh. One letter, dated the 20th of January 1738, reached her lawyer, Thomas Hope of Rankilaw, in December 1740. Some accounts suggest that the first letter was concealed within yarn collected as part of a rent payment, which was then transported to Inverness and subsequently to Edinburgh. This notion of concealing the letter in yarn is also referenced by James Boswell in his Journal of a Tour to the Hebrides, 1785. However, Macaulay argues that this delivery method lacks factual support, asserting that both letters were smuggled off Hirta by Roderick MacLennan, the island's minister. Regardless of how it was delivered, the letter created quite a stir in Edinburgh, although James Erskine's associates successfully thwarted Hope's attempts to secure a warrant to search St Kilda. In her second letter, addressed to Dr. Carlyle, minister of Inveresk, Lady Grange expresses her bitterness regarding the involvement of Lord Lovat and Roderick MacLeod in her abduction, and laments being referred to by Sir Alexander MacDonald as the cargo. Hope, who was aware of Lady Grange's removal from Edinburgh, had initially believed she would be well looked after. Disturbed by her condition, he financed a sloop with 20 armed men to travel to St Kilda at his own cost. Unfortunately, it had already departed by 14th February 1741, but arrived too late. Lady Grange was taken from the island, likely during the summer of 1740. Following the Battle of Culloden in 1746, whispers circulated that Prince Charles Edward Stuart and several of his prominent Jacobite associates had sought refuge in St Kilda. An expedition was organized, and British soldiers eventually landed on Hardship. They encountered an abandoned village, as the inhabitants of St Kilda, fearing pirate incursions, had retreated to the caves to the west. When coaxed to emerge, the soldiers found that these secluded islanders were entirely unaware of the prince's fate and had no knowledge of King George II. Ironically, the letters of Lady Grange and her subsequent removal from the island may have shielded her from discovery by this expedition. By 1740, Lady Grange was 61 years of age. In a hurried departure from St Kilda, she was relocated to various sites in the Gide Heltacht, possibly including Assynt in the far northwest of mainland Scotland and the Outer Hebrides of Harris and Uist, before finally reaching Waternish on Skye in 1742. Local legends suggest she may have spent 18 months hidden in a cave, either at Idregill on the Trotternish Peninsula or along the Duerinish coast near the formations known as MacLeod's Maidens. Ultimately, she was housed with Rory MacNeill at Trumpan in Waternish, where she passed away on the 12th of May, 1745. MacNeill ensured she was decently interred the following week in the churchyard of Trumpan. Other accounts claim she died in a modest cotar's cottage at Idregill in June 1749. For reasons that remain unclear, a second funeral was conducted at nearby Duerinish at a later date, drawing a large crowd to witness the burial of a coffin filled with earth and stones. It is sometimes suggested that this was her third funeral, as Lord Grange is said to have presided over one in Edinburgh shortly after her abduction. However, this narrative first emerged in written form in 1845, and no further evidence has substantiated its authenticity. Lady Grange's narrative is truly extraordinary, prompting a myriad of inquiries as highlighted by Macaulay, 2009. Among these are, what compelled James Erskine to undertake such drastic measures? Why did numerous individuals consent to partake in the perilous and illicit abduction of his wife? And how was she able to remain in captivity for such an extended period without any rescue efforts? The first two inquiries are intricately linked. Erskine's brother had previously faced exile due to his allegiance to the Jacobite cause. Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, a pivotal figure in Lady Grange's kidnapping, ultimately met his demise for his involvement in the Jacobite Rising of 1745. Although no definitive proof of Erskine's conspiracy against the crown or government has surfaced, any insinuation of such a threat, whether grounded in reality or mere speculation, would have been taken with utmost seriousness by all parties involved. Consequently, Erskine found it relatively straightforward to enlist the support of the Highland gentry. Alongside Simon Fraser and Alexander MacDonald of Sleat, the Sobieski Stuarts identified Norman MacLeod of Dunvegan, dubbed the Wicked Man, as one of the principal conspirators. Erskine himself was a complex amalgamation of virtues and vices. In addition to his legal pursuits, he was elected to Parliament in 1734 and navigated the tumultuous waters of the Jacobite uprisings without suffering any repercussions. He was known for his romantic escapades and a fondness for claret. yet he also possessed a profound religious conviction. This latter trait likely influenced his decision against having his wife murdered, and he only wed his longtime companion Fanny Lindsay after learning of Lady Grange's passing. The absence of a successful rescue can be attributed to the isolation of the Hebrides from the English-speaking world during the early 18th century. Reliable naval charts of the region did not become accessible until 1776, and without local expertise and assistance, locating a captive in such a desolate landscape would have necessitated a considerable expeditionary force. The indifference displayed by Edinburgh society, particularly her own children, towards the plight of one of their own is striking. The hierarchy of the Kirk, for instance, made no effort to reach out or inform the capital about her circumstances, despite the ease with which they could have done so. Regardless of the moral imperatives and notions of natural justice that might have been invoked, it is evident that John Cheesley's daughter did not find a compassionate audience in her hometown. In her examination of this incident, Margaret Macaulay delves into the prevailing 18th century perceptions of women as a crucial element, highlighting that while numerous documents from Lord Grange's allies remain, not a single contemporary female perspective on the matter has endured, apart from that of Lady Grange herself. The complexities surrounding divorce meant that mothers who had been divorced seldom retained custody of their children. Additionally, the formidable connections of Lord Grange within both ecclesiastical and legal circles rendered any attempt to challenge the status quo a perilous venture. Insights into James Erskine's views on such issues can be gleaned from his inaugural speech in the House of Commons, where he chose to oppose the repeal of witchcraft laws, a stance that, even in his time, was perceived as excessively conservative and met with derision, effectively truncating his political aspirations. In the mid-19th century, the Sobieski Stuarts recounted the narrative from the viewpoint of the descendants of the Highland aristocrats responsible for Cheesley's abduction and confinement. They accentuate Lady Grange's personal failings, yet to contemporary sensibilities, these hardly justify the orchestration of an unlawful kidnapping and lifelong imprisonment by a judge, a member of Parliament, and his affluent associates. As for Lady Grange, her vitriolic outbursts and penchant for alcohol were undeniably significant contributors to her downfall. Alexander Carlyle characterized her as stormy and outrageous, while suggesting that her husband had a vested interest in amplifying the intensity of her passionate outbursts. Macaulay, 2009, posits that the root of her turmoil stemmed from her response to her husband's betrayal. In a desperate bid to sever his ties with Mrs. Lindsay, a coffee house proprietor in Haymarket, Edinburgh, Rachel threatened to reveal his Jacobite sympathies. It is possible that she underestimated the gravity of such an accusation and the peril it posed to her husband and his associates, not to mention the lengths to which they might go to protect themselves. The saga of Rachel Cheesley inspired a romantic poem titled Epistle from Lady Grange to Edward D. Esk, penned by William Erskine in 1798, as well as a 1905 novel, The Lady of Hierta, A Tale of the Isles, by W.C. Mackenzie. Edwin Morgan contributed a sonnet in 1984 named Lady Grange on St Kilda. The Straw Chair, a two-act play by Sue Glover, also delves into the events on St Kilda, premiering at the Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh in 1988. Judith Adams's play Birdalane, which recounts these same occurrences, was performed in 1996 at the Battersea Arts Centre in London and aired on BBC Radio 4. Rachel Cheesley further inspired Andrew Drummond's fantasy novel The Books of the Incarceration of the Lady Grange, 2016, and Sue Lawrence's The Unreliable Death of Lady Grange, 2020. During their 1773 expedition to the Hebrides, Boswell and Johnson engaged in discussions regarding the remarkable circumstance of Lady Grange's confinement on St Kilda for several years without any means of escape. Boswell noted, "After dinner today, we spoke of the extraordinary fact of Lady Grange's being sent to St Kilda and confined there for several years without any means of escape." Boswell noted, "After dinner today, we spoke of the extraordinary fact of Lady Grange's being sent to St Kilda and confined there for several years without any means of relief." Dr. Johnson remarked that if Maliad were to advertise such a location for wayward women, it could become a highly lucrative venture. Portraits of both James Erskine and Rachel Cheesley grace the walls of the Scottish National Portraits Gallery in Edinburgh, created by the esteemed artists William Aikman and Sir John Baptiste de Medina, respectively. When the author of Margaret Macaulay went in search of them, she found that they had been stored together in the same chilly facility.